certainly was time to replace them. Hi everyone, and welcome to Drive Chris Capredoni, your source for automotive reviews, analysis, maintenance, and restorations. Please subscribe to our channel, watch the entire video, watch our other videos, and of course, click on notifications to be first to learn about new videos. I'm Chris Capredoni, and in this how-to DIY video, I will explain and demonstrate spark plug replacement in a BMW X5 E70 with the N55 gas turbo engine. Properly functioning spark plugs are vital to achieve maximum fuel efficiency as well as maximum power. Good spark plugs can provide a stronger and more consistent spark, which leads to more complete combustion and better engine performance. Let's get over to the BMW's engine bay and get started. Hi everyone, so today I will be replacing the 6 spark plugs in a BMW X5 E70 with the N55 gas turbo engine. Now, the factory spec spark plug is a double platinum spark plug, so I'm going to be installing these Bosch double platinum. You can, of course, upgrade to an iridium spark plug. They're usually about double in price, and the performance enhancement over a double platinum is marginal at best. I don't believe, nor will you feel, any real-world benefit in performance or gas mileage from going up to an iridium. So paying double for a spark plug that you really won't get any benefit from doesn't make any economic sense. So I highly recommend, and I will be installing the double platinum today. In order to get to the spark plugs, there's a lot that has to go on in order to prep the vehicle, especially the 2 spark plugs closest to the firewall. In this current state, they're impossible to reach. So a number of things have to come off. As simple as this cover here, all the air filter housing has to be removed, all of this cowling housing, this cross member brace, the cabin air filter assembly, and the housing below it all has to be removed in order to gain as much wiggle room as possible for those 2 spark plugs near the firewall. So I'm going to get the vehicle all prepped and set up, and I'll walk you through step by step on what I do to prep the vehicle, then remove the spark plugs, and then install the new ones to the proper torque. So very first step is to remove this plastic cover because you can't do any of the work with it while it's there. You lift up from the front and pull out. The next step is to start removing some of the air filter housing. So what I need to do is remove the box and the plumbing going to the opposite side of the engine up to about here. So I'll need a T27 Torx bit to remove these 6 screws, and then a flathead to remove the O clamps there, and then down there. These don't separate, they just unscrew and lift up. Next is to loosen up the O-clamps. And then finally the one down here. So before I actually totally lift out the remaining of the housing of the hosing here, I need to disconnect this vacuum line And also this positive crankcase ventilation hose has to be disconnected either here or here, preferably here. But you need to be extremely careful because these little tongs are very brittle. And if you apply too much pressure, you're going to crack them, and then you're going to have to replace this part. That's happened to me before. I'm going to make the attempt to very carefully lift all these tabs up and slide it off its mounting point. Okay, so I was successful in carefully lifting out all 4 tabs. There's 3 that you can see and then 1 behind. If you put in just a small flathead screwdriver and lift up one, hold your finger, lift up the other, lift up the third one, wiggle it a little bit, and then go from behind and slightly lift the last one, you can wiggle it off without damaging those prongs. Now, if this is only a couple years old, so the plastic is still pliable, if this is the first time in like 10 years that it's been touched, the odds are those tabs are brittle, they're going to break. So don't sweat it, just break them off and then order a new piece. I think you can get one off of Amazon for something like $30 or $40. Don't worry about damaging the piece. It's easily to replace. And then you just have those 2 Torx bit screws to remove, one sensor connector, and it's a very easy dismantling and then reinstall. I was lucky this time. I'm not always. For this part of the housing for the air filter near the firewall, there is one little connection at the bottom, which I'll point out. It's right there. You just need to pop it off and up in order to remove it. There's also a sensor behind, a connector. I don't recall if you need to disconnect it to actually move it out of the way, but if I do, I'll show you how I do that. So I carefully lifted out that housing. You can see the sensor has a connector that's long enough that I can actually lift it up and out of the way. So I'm going to leave it in this position now because now I have access to all of the spark plugs all the way to the firewall. I still can't take them out because of all this cowling above it, but that will be the next step. I'm going to be removing the rubber stripping and then the top cover on both sides, then undoing the screws, holding in all of that assembly, and start removing it out of the way. In order to remove the plastic cover, there are these plastic nut heads, and they're a 13 millimeter head, and you just very carefully turn them a quarter turn until they stop. Each one has 4 of them that you just turn a quarter turn, and then you'll be able to lift it up and out. Next we need to remove the air cabin filter housing, which is this plastic box here. Again, there are 3 plastic bolts that you turn a quarter turn, and then 1 electrical connector that you need to disconnect in order to fully remove this entire housing. Carefully remove the rubber stripping all the way to the driver's side of the vehicle. That should be enough. The next step is to remove this centerpiece here. There are 2 T25 Torx head screws that need to be removed. So just carefully remove them. Make sure they don't fall into the engine. Once you remove them, you need to be able to lift this. There's sealant here. You need to push it forward and lift it up and out. sorry, so there are two other screws that need to be removed, one there and one there, and then you should be able to lift out this centerpiece. Next, I need to remove this big piece of plastic housing, and what's attaching it is two Torx bits screws, two 14mm bolts, one there and one there, and then finally one little fastener here, which I just need to use a pair of needle nose pliers to carefully lift out. So once I remove all 5 of those fasteners, that piece should come out. Then I can remove the cross member brace, the aluminum one, below, and I think that's two 14mm bolts just holding that in place. So these two cross member bolts are actually 15mm bolts. Now with the aluminum cross member out of the way, I can proceed to what will be the final steps in prepping. And what I need to do is I need to remove all of this plastic housing, and it's being held in place by some Torx bolts, and then these two connectors, again, a bracket holding them in with the same style of fasteners. Since I have to disconnect them, I labeled them BB, AA, so when I do separate them, these will most likely fall closer to the bottom of the engine block. So when I reconnect them, I know which ones need to go with what. It's always in prepping to make sure that you have a strategy on how to put it back together and label them properly. You won't have to guess. Okay, so I'm going to get the proper Torx bit and start removing these last few screws in order to gain access to the last two spark plugs. So I disconnected electrical connector that I marked by B, which I have access now to the Torx head screw holding this whole bracket in place. That's a T30 Torx head, so I need to remove that, and then this whole assembly will detach, giving me access to the spark plugs below. In addition to removing the two screws holding this piece of plastic housing, there are also two screws on the opposite side that need to be removed. So there's 4 screws in total, and then you should be able to lift and move it out of the way so that you can work on the first spark plug close to the firewall. So this now is loose, and I can move it out of the way so that I can access the 5th one and the 6th one right there. So if you've survived all of that, now I can see all 6 spark plug coil packs. And these are quite easy to remove. What you do is you just lift up on one end, lift it up, and then you can pull it carefully out. So it's just like holding from this side and then be able to wiggle it and pull it out carefully. These are very snug. First, disconnect there, and then you should be able to pull them out. I know I can't show it very well, but I'll set up again to show you. So what I did was I disconnected the electrical connector and moved it out of the way, and then the coil pack handle, I was just able to wiggle it and pull it out. Now be very careful with these, don't damage them. They may need to be cleaned. This one's looking pretty good. I'm going to put it aside. I've labeled it as number 1 going to cylinder number 1. As you can see, there's a spark plug down there. That one's an easy one. That one is not. So I will probably have to have a wobble head, from what I recall doing it several years ago, in order to remove the old one and carefully reinstall the new one. All 6 coil packs have been carefully removed, and you can see down in cylinder 3, you can see there's the spark plug down there, and cylinder 2, the spark plug. Now what you need is a special type of tool to remove the spark plugs. You need to get a socket that's, here I'll show a photo, show it. This is a very 12.14 millimeter socket nut that's thin walled, because anything that's standard thickness will not fit down in the lower shaft. So make sure that you can locate this tool. It may be a specialty order tool. BMW will most likely have it. Granger, a number of specialty hardware suppliers online. Just do some research to find it. It doesn't cost very much. I think this is $20, but again, it's one of those lifelong tools. As long as you own a BMW, you're going to need this to replace the spark plugs. So my next step now is to start inserting it in the first cylinder and start removing the spark plugs. I'll show you the condition of them as I start removing them. Okay, there's some carbon on them, but they're not in bad shape. Definitely need to be replaced. Now, I forgot to mention the gapping on these double platinum is 0.032 of an inch. So they come pre-gapped. Do not adjust the gap, leave them alone. It's important not to touch pre-gapped spark plugs. It's also important to note that when you're removing or installing the spark plug, that your tool is not centered. It's more closer to the bottom. There's a slight angle at the bottom entering the top of the cylinder head. So the hole is much larger to accommodate you removing and installing them on a slight angle. You can see I'm closer to the bottom of the hole as opposed to the center. Make sure that when you're reinstalling them, that you're following the natural movement of the thread and not forcing it to the center, because then you'll damage the threads. So here is the spark plug closest to the firewall. You can see that I slipped my ratchet underneath this plastic cable housing. It's very tight, but you have a direct line of sight. I can see down the hole as well with everything removed. That's the benefit of moving everything. You can see what you're doing, and it reduces the risk of doing any damage to the spark plug. So it's very tight. I'll have to do very small turns, but I'll eventually be able to get it out. One step that I recommend is when you're installing the brand new spark plugs, to apply what's called dielectric tune-up grease to the ceramic part, so the white part of the spark plug. Just a thin coat. You can see I've applied a thin coat. And what that's supposed to do is it's supposed to prevent voltage leakage, arcing, or anything negative corrosion-wise on the top of the spark plug. It's a quick solution, gives you a little bit more assurance that the spark plugs are going to work properly and for the service life of the spark plug. So it's a step that I recommend. Go to your local auto parts supply store and pick some up and apply it to only like just very liberally or very conservatively, a very thin layer of the grease onto the white ceramic part. When you're installing the new plugs, always start them off by hand. You don't want to apply any leverage from the start because you don't want to do any cross threading or anything damaging to the spark plug. So I just have it on the end of the shaft, insert it down. I can see what I'm doing and just start slowly turning and guiding it with your fingers. I feel it grabbing. Once it starts to get a little bit more difficult, then you can move to installing the actual wrench to it. And again, slow and easy. This is not something you want to force. This is something you just want to guide. Midway point, I'll pull out the ratchet just to see if it actually is catching. I have this magnetic picker-upper, and I'll see if I can pull it out. If not, I know that it's catching on the threads. Okay, all the spark plugs have been installed, including the far one closest to the firewall. It's just basically the same same procedure as all the rest, just that it's very, very tight quarters. So the next step now is to torque them down. They need to be torqued to 23 Newton meters. I think that must be about 17 pound-feet, but this one's calibrated in Newton meters. So what you do is I have it set to 23, insert it, and then 23. I've done that one already. Oh. I lost my socket in there. I have to get it out. Okay, continuing on to number 3. Okay, that's done. And again, my socket keeps getting stuck. I have long needle nose pliers. Okay. And I'm just going to do all of them, including the far one, all to 23 Newton meters. Then I can start reassembling. So once all of the spark plugs have been installed and torqued, the next thing is to put the coil packs back in. And it's very easy. It's just basically pushing it back in, connecting the electrical connector, and then pushing it down, the lid. So insert. Okay. Get the electrical connector, make sure it's lined up properly, push it in, and then push down. And that's pretty much it. So I've done 1, 2, I'll do the other 4. This one I have a little bit less room to work, but it's the exact same process, just a little bit more patience. So that completes the reassembly. Basically all I did was do the reverse of the tear down. Everything's been reinstalled. Since I had the cabin air filters out, I replaced them. So why take it apart again at a later date when I know that I need to do it now? So I did that, checked everything over, everything looks good. The air filter's fine, so I left it in before I reinstalled the housing. Everything's been done. So these spark plugs, probably under normal wear and tear, should last you anywhere from 3 to 5 years, depending on mileage as well. I am probably going to schedule a check in about 3 years to check them. Pull one out, check it. If I don't like the way it looks or it's aging more rapidly than it should, I'm just going to replace them in the same procedure. Now this job is quite expensive if you go to a mechanic or in particular a BMW dealership. So it's worth the effort to spend 2-3 hours doing it. Once you've done it once, you know what to do the next time. You can make notes, but it should be part of your regular maintenance to do it yourself. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching this comprehensive DIY tutorial on replacing the spark plugs in a BMW X5 E70 with the N55 6-cylinder turbo gas engine. We hope you found this DIY video informative. Double platinum spark plugs have been known to last approximately 100,000 miles or 160,000 kilometers, but it is recommended that they be replaced well before that milestone to ensure you have plugs that provide a strong and consistent spark. Having properly functioning spark plugs ensures a complete combustion cycle and better engine performance. Replacing spark plugs every 3 to 5 years or 50 to 70,000 miles maintains the fuel efficiency of your engine and maximizes power at all RPM ranges. Please subscribe to our channel, Drive Chris Capredoni, and watch our other informative videos as your source for vehicle reviews, analysis, maintenance, and restorations.